When Frodo returns home to the Shire after his journey, he speaks to his psychological wounds that never truly heal. There is no real going back. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. I am wounded with knife, sting and tooth, and a long burden. Where shall I find rest? Eventually, Frodo would pass into the West in hopes to heal and find peace from carrying the burden of the One Ring and the deep trauma that came with his experiences. This emotional beat in The Lord of the Rings speaks to Tolkien's experiences as part of the generation that emerged from World War I with high rates of PTSD following the traumatic experiences of war. But it's also an example of a soft magic system in action, a magic system with few rules or limitations, and it epitomizes what I feel is an often dismissed unique strength about them. People these days often see hard magic systems as better than soft, but this is a defense of soft magic systems. The exact rules around the magic of the One Ring, beyond it turning hobbits invisible, are largely ambiguous. We know it draws Nazgul, can prolong life, it has an addictive power, but its most important property is that it worms its way into the mind of whoever carries it and those around them. Frodo seemed to be wary to the point of exhaustion. He said nothing. Indeed, he hardly spoke at all, and he did not complain, but he walked like one who carries a load, the weight of which is ever increasing. The thing is, this important magical property of the One Ring is pretty soft. And this isn't a criticism, by the way, just an observation. Tolkien never set out to define this effect with any strict rules the way Brandon Sanderson might. It doesn't affect people consistently in the same way, either in how it tempts them or the powers it gives them. There aren't defined methods that the characters can use to resist it, and you can't necessarily quantify the effects that it has on ring bearers psychologically and emotionally. Not in easy terms, hence why Tolkien opted for the somewhat vague line, "I am wounded with a long burden." But that's kind of the point, isn't it? Because the emotional beats of Frodo's story here aren't really about the magic. It's about trauma and the difficulty of returning to your old life even when it's over. It's an example of what we'll call the psychological tension in a story. The immersive experience of Frodo's personal journey with the ring is about how it torments him, how he comes to need and love this thing that he knows that he should hate, and how even when it's gone, even though he's relieved, he says, "It is gone forever, and now all is dark and empty." He defined himself by the One Ring for so long, and now it's gone. Defining the magic of how the One Ring worms its way into the mind of ring bearers with hard rules would undermine that more complex and grounded experience, because trauma itself and dealing with it doesn't neatly abide by hard rules, and soft magic better supports that thematically. Magic here is being used to tell a different kind of story, a different kind of emotional beat and tension. Now, the usual justification for preferring hard magic systems is something along the lines of, I want magic to be a tool that the reader and characters can use to logically solve problems with. And this is usually compounded with a criticism of soft magic systems along the lines of, having characters use magic inexplicably robs the story of tension and payoff. And these are good points to make, I've made them myself. But they're not necessarily always true. A major mechanic in Don't Nod's 2015 game Life is Strange is that the player character, Max Caulfield, can rewind time. This little spiral here tells you how much you can rewind, and you can use it to solve problems and redo conversations in the story. But it's an oddly soft mechanic for such a large part of the game. The little spiral might tell you how much you can rewind, but the exact amount of time it allows you to control changes from scene to scene. There are some moments where you can't rewind at all of a sudden, and throughout the game, sometimes random new powers come to you at pretty convenient times that don't naturally arise from the rules established beforehand. The clearest example of this is at the end of episode 2, where you intervene to save Kate Marsh from taking her own life. You arrive at school and you see her atop the building. Now, under the usual magical game mechanics the player would rely on, you can't move while rewinding time. But Max suddenly finds herself able to do this in order to reach the top of the building, and depending on which answers you now choose here, you push her closer to the edge or you draw her back, and under usual magical game mechanics, you can rewind time when you pick a wrong answer, but you suddenly find yourself unable to use your powers this time. In the past she just fainted, but she never lost her powers, and this problem doesn't really ever come up again. A lot of authors would see these as red flags of bad writing, and within Brandon Sanderson's emphasis on predictability and consistency, that would be fair. If the reader, or in this case the player, can't rely on clear magic rules to solve problems, then obstacles can seem random, and plot resolution can feel cheap and successes unearned. But much like how those emotional beats of Frodo's story were never about the magic of the One Ring, the emotional beats of Life is Strange were never about time travel. Life is Strange explores suicide, abuse, depression, and other social problems, and the narrative tension arises from you trying to navigate these issues, to make the right choice without knowing what the full ramifications might be down the line. Like before, these are psychological tensions. Having a hard magic system with a defined cause and effect play a major role in resolving these complex issues would undermine the thematic importance of these issues in the first place. Much like how Tolkien knew that you can't logically solve Frodo's trauma, you can't logically solve Kate's suicidality, Chloe's self-destructive tendencies, or Nathan's abuse with clear and defined rules. In contrast, Life is Strange's soft and inconsistent magic system ensured that the narrative weight remained on your choices, which are complicated and difficult to make, much like the very issues that the stories are addressing. And the magic system changes and evolves where it needs to best explore those issues, and that's what's important in this story. If you manage to get Kate down off that roof, it's not because of your clever exploitation of the magic system, it's because you paid attention throughout the story and you managed to talk someone down. And that carries a lot more emotional weight. Likewise, if you fail to get Kate down off that roof, it's not because you didn't manage to use the magic system correctly. Compare this to hard magic stories, where characters often solve major problems in the narrative with creative uses of the magic system. In Brandon Sanderson's The Well of Ascension, an army of creatures called the Colossus become a massive problem in the book, and the narrative tension builds around restraining them and controlling them until Vin manages to use the Allomantic magic system to control them by burning a particular metal, something the readers could have figured out. And there's a massive narrative payoff when she does that, because the tension is resolved in a way that the story naturally built towards. A large part of the immersion in these stories comes from what we'll call the fantastical tension that we can't see in other genres, figuring out the magic system alongside the characters, having tension built around and resolved by it. And that's okay, but it's a different kind of narrative setup and payoff. When it comes to storytelling, soft magic is better suited to support psychological tensions in a story, while hard magic is better suited to support fantastical tensions. This is not to say that they can't do the reverse, not at all, but I think that this is where each of their strengths lie. They serve different roles in the narrative, this being one of them. And the strength in soft magic extends beyond mental illness. I use that as an example because it's what I read and what I write, but it fits just the same for any other abstract ideas or themes or tensions that aren't fantastical, like relationships or politics. I prefer soft magic because I find stories that are first and foremost about those issues and only secondarily about the fantasy more emotionally engaging. And I understand that that's personal for me. I look to fiction to process and reflect on my own problems, both in what I read and what I write. That's actually why I enjoyed The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness so much, because it's got a soft magic edge to it, but it's fundamentally about anxiety and what the hell it means to be an adult. How we explore this stuff in fiction matters. It can help people, but I think we should do more than that. And that's why, on December 6th, I'm going to be doing my first ever charity livestream for 24 hours straight. No sleep, right here on YouTube. And every cent will go to Crisis Text Line as the finale of their Get Out the Number campaign. My only sustenance will be energy drinks and your donations. And to make this work, I will be personally matching every donation up to $1,000. So until then, every dollar you donate is worth double. I chose Crisis Text Line because I'm a counsellor with a similar organisation here in New Zealand, and I know the difference that they make to keeping people safe, to those struggling in really dark places with suicidality, trauma, and other mental illnesses. And not only that, but across the stream, I will be joined by over a dozen other YouTubers like Alexander Cuenin, Nandovi Movies, OSP, and other creators to help keep me from kind of going insane. My mission, which I've chosen to accept, is to try and complete all 3 of the original Spyro games in under 24 hours. And that's because when I was going through some tough times and tough thoughts, I played Spyro. I kind of retreated to it. Playing Spyro was a form of self-care for me, and self-care is really important. This poster is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and please do share it wherever you like. It would be an immense help. Now, I have no idea how this is going to pan out or how much money we are going to raise, but doing something is always going to be better than silence. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future, specifically on December 6th.